Suspend that assumption that you can't change the system. The master is the economy and you're the servant. It's not how it needs to be.
The systems we're part of, the way we're doing things in the world, it clearly isn't working. We need to ask different questions because we're not going to get different answers till we start doing that.
What are the stories we tell ourselves? The mythology that underlies our current economy and our ways of living and being together. These stories hold us in patterns that separate us from each other and from the land. They perpetuate systems of power and domination, coloniality, and destruction of our shared home. These are the stories that hold us back from healing and from transformation. These are the stories that we seek to challenge and change. Over the course of 6 weeks in the spring of 2022, several of us who felt called to question these stories gathered together at the Northern Woods Summit. We were archaeologists and we were artists, crafting new stories and remembering old ones.
I think we need to be gentle with each other as humans who, as individuals and as collectives, have been making mistakes for centuries. And the mistakes that we have been making most frequently in the last number of decades has been related to the veneration of economic growth as a savior for us all. And it has also been causing harm to other species and for people who have been left behind in our society with very little attention to questions of equity.
So, well, what if we just asked every individual in a nation, is the economy serving you? What are the indicators, but not just what are the indicators, but who gets to answer that question?
Unless we have a space at the table for everybody, you're always going to have something missing. Because in an Indigenous viewpoint, from the teachings that I have, everybody in the circle matters. It's honoring people where they came from, what stories are that they hold, and I'm not just here, I'm bringing my ancestors with me.
The decades ahead are urgent calls for us to sort of do something. But in order to get there, we can't panic to the point where we're not drawing upon the wisdom that comes from being present and being slow.
There's a lot of beauty in that slowing down and a lot of learning that comes in those spaces too.
There needs to be this flourishing, this nurturing of deeper relationality. And when we reach that pinnacle point where we have not just the critical mass, but the critical connection in the critical mass, that's when something will shift.
It's like a pebble in the water. That's just so small. But then the waves, right, go out and interact with other people's waves and create something new that we may not even see.
Western thought leads us to believe that the social sphere and the environmental sphere are separate. But if you go back in the Indigenous tradition, there's no language of separation. You cannot have one without the other. You cannot have a thriving human society without a thriving planetary society. The current stories of economics are so disconnected from reality. What do you intuitively feel an economy should be for?
Put the grandmas in the central bank. I'll write that briefing note, stitched in a quilt of all our knowledge. Then we will take it to the elders, to the land and stars and people. The we never dies. Not just for the model, math, or theory, but because our stories carry us, where our measures are the laughter of a family, the ratio of a love to respect, long etched into our eyes.
What if we let the grandmothers decide whether or not the economy is doing well? The grandmothers know whether or not the economy is fulfilling the dreams and aspirations from a point of view of a long memory.
What's the first step a person can take? They can tell a story. They can tell their story. And the story of the things that we value, the things that are meaningful to us, that's the first step. That's economics.
Whenever we use language, we just have to be aware that it could be taken as a note of exclusion. And, if I'm going to launch into a conversation about what I really mean about economy, probably not using the word economy is a better choice. There are all those other words that actually explain what you mean by that, but you never get to say them.
How do we create the space for people to know and do and be differently? What does it take to create the space for that? And it is only when we will decenter these exploitative, colonial, capitalist ways of knowing, doing, and being in the world, it is only when they'll go away that there will be space for something else. And in that space is where we need to have dialogues of wisdoms, not just one, there is many.
For me, the vision is really around the plurality of having not just one artist paint the canvas of the economy, but having all the artists paint on the same canvas. That would be a masterpiece.
How or what a well-being economy would look like, it would decenter what exists, it would recenter, remember what we have forgotten, and it would be built on the premise of community care. Community care would be completely natural. It would be the obvious thing.
Everything that we have in the human world is only limited by imagination. Be part, dare to imagine the unimaginable.
At Northern Woods, yes, we spend a lot of time unpacking our economic mythologies and reimagining economies centered around people and planetary well-being. But deep down, we are weaving a new fabric of relations. We invite you to be a thread in that cloth that is beginning to form. Question the stories, tell new ones, and come join us at the Wellbeing Economies Alliance for Canada and Sovereign Indigenous Nations.